evening, all my true crimers. Welcome back to All True Crime with Jody ASMR. I just want to start, with the fact that this is a very graphic case, and if you have any kind of triggers on pretty much anything, it's in this story. I want to put a disclaimer. Please, nobody under the age of probably 16. I would say that's up to you as parents, but even then, your discretion is advised. See and hear something your whole life, but you can never take back something you've seen or something you've heard. So when deciding on listening to true crime, make sure that you want to hear this. That is something that you want to have in your mind for the rest of your life. I mean, somebody like me, I'm just fascinated by it, but other people are very sensitive to this. So if you have any sensitivities to anything with death or brutality, I'm just gonna throw that out there because it is pretty gruesome case. I whisper only because that's how I like to hear true crime cases. Not any disrespect to the victims or their families. Matter of fact, it's opposite. I find that true crime, because of its sensitive nature, listening to it being presented in a whisper is less disturbing, and I think I can absorb the details and understand the case better and not get so emotional. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Go ahead and get a drink. We'll get started. And I'm used to the camera being on that side now. I switched it over, so I keep looking over there. I'll try to stop doing that. So it was a cold January night in 1999, Krakow, Poland. There was a captain of a tugboat approaching the mooring spot where he would park the tugboat on a mooring. The propeller stopped working suddenly. However, there's something really strange about this, because there's lots of garbage floating around in the Vistula river, and that can happen stuck in pretty much anything, plastic bags or garbage, and it will disable it. So the captain of this tugboat floated the short distance to the mooring, and he secured his tugboat. So he decided to deal with the issue the next morning. So it was even colder that morning. It's really, really icy. January 6th, as this captain walked back to the boat. It was still dark, so it wasn't very long. Really a day of his life that he never had as the captain. And of course, the captain always has a deckhand with them, especially on a boat that size. Pulls an object out of their propeller. They are staring at it, a little confused, probably. Looks like a thick piece of leather or fabric. Perhaps they don't really know, or maybe just clothing. It looks like it's wrapped in clothing, so they don't really know what it is. They made him take a second look on the leather. For whatever it was, there's a human ear just kind of stuck there with a piercing where an earring used to be, and you know you can tell when a piece of leather or something has been pierced. And something has been pushed through it. It's not attached to the leather. The pale, leathery object wrapped in fabric that was stuck in the propeller was the skin of a female body, but there was no body. There was no body at all, just the skin sliced off with surgical precision. So police obviously just come crashing down on the Vistula River in central Krakow, searching for the rest of the body belonging to an unidentified female. A week later, fragments of clothing, the flesh of a butt, and a leg that was cut below the knee was discovered by police divers. Fortunately, there was new forensic technology to help investigators. This is, I think I mentioned earlier, I hope I didn't mention it twice, that, the DNA has gotten so much better with time. So more and more cases are able to be solved, and people are able to either be found guilty or set free because of DNA. So it's been a wonderful way, instead of circumstantial evidence, to criminally convict somebody and completely alleviate others of a wrongdoing who had been accused previously. So who was this victim? It was the first time in history that DNA was actually used in Polish to identify a victim. She was a 23-year-old student. Too bad. So she had disappeared 2 months before. The case completely shocked the nation. It had been, of course, titled Silence of the Lambs, Poland, because of the horrific nature of Silence of the Lambs. An investigation commenced that was spanned over 2 decades, so 20 years, before an arrest was eventually made. Can you imagine? The mother identified her, and I'm thinking will most likely bring her killer to justice. But I don't think there could be justice. What happened to this poor girl? So, Kasia was born the 1st of June, 1976, so she was my age. And she was an only child, very close to her father. She never had many friends, only 1 or 2 close ones, as she was an introverted person who did not open up very easily. In January of 1996, her father took her hiking. They loved doing this together, but unfortunately he fell and slipped, and he suffered an injury to his spinal cord. Then, because of this injury, it caused a horrible illness, and he passed away. Kasia would never be the same. Of course, after losing her father, she blamed herself for his death and fell into a depression. So the thing they loved to do the most together was basically what killed him, and unfortunately she was there. That would be horrible. Kasia lived with her mother, Marta, and now in an architecturally significant area, but that was built in the Soviet era. Religious studies. So as 23-year-old Kasia was shy and withdrawn. Other students did not really know her all that well. She had a friend whom she met in high school called Anna. She had quite an influence on Kasia, and when she gave her Tom Wolfe's book, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, Kasia was mesmerized. It is a counterculture book that chronicles the trip of Ken Kesey and an LSD community who call themselves the Merry Pranksters. They travel across the United States in a colorful painted school bus. They were constantly tripping on LSD and saw Kesey as their leader or messiah. The New York Times called the book the essential book about hippies. The book also, my comment, I was say not all hippies took was very commonplace, and a lot of non-hippies took acid. The book also tells about encounters with the band Grateful Dead. It's funny because lots of my friends growing up loved the Grateful Dead. I mean, we would travel all over to see them. Kasia would go on to become an avid fan of their music. Kasia also enjoyed reading science fiction novels and watched sci-fi movies, but most of all she enjoyed listening to music. She loved everything to do with the hippie lifestyle and philosophy, and saw herself as a 1990s hippie too. That's so funny because I was telling my daughter, there's all different new trends out there, and I said, yeah, we used to dress as hippies because, we kind of, it wasn't the drugs or the drinking, it was more just like the hair and the chill and then just relax, the peaceful feeling of being with people and just not being so angry. There's one specific student club, but I can't pronounce that, sorry, with a record store and a restaurant where Kasia often hung out. She had CDs and cassettes. I remember those places. The youth scene in Krakow in the 90s is quite an interesting one. There was interest in death, evil, and Satan. Studies into the occult became a favorite pastime, and horror films were very popular. Obviously concerned her mother, she insisted that Kasia went for therapy and would meet at her psychologist's room to make sure she attended her sessions. Kasia was reliable and also wanted help for her depression, so she was always punctual and never missed a session. So November 12th, 1998, when she did not show up for a 6 p.m. appointment, her mother immediately got worried, and there was no sign of her at home. And then panic started really to set in with Marta. The first instinct was to think that Kasia had joined a cult. Her first port of call in looking for her daughter was Dominican monastery, known to extract young people from cults. At the monastery, she was advised to report the case to the police, which she did. But as Kasia was 23 years old and an adult, the police were not too concerned. Of course, they felt certain that she would resurface at some point. At the time, police were consumed by a big international case in Krakow. Everyone was looking for Miska, a Vistula Krakow soccer fan who threw a knife at an Italian midfielder, Dino Baggia, during a match in Krakow. So Kasia, her case was a missing person, and her mother was on a mission to find her, but it was kind of on the back burner, not in the front line news, which would have helped. Probably, as I read this, probably would have helped quite a bit, maybe even saved her life. So in the morning of November 12th, she wore a hooded corduroy jacket with black jeans and red shoes. With lack of interest from police, she hired a private detective to assist her in the search for her daughter. Sadly, nobody knew what happened to Kasia. They just assumed that her depression and she had ended her life because of it, and they were essentially looking for her body, not a rescue. So they were looking for a young girl who committed suicide and never even dreamt that she was murdered or might have been taken. That is too bad that they kind of classified her as suicidal instead of really believing her mom. That Kasia went missing during depressing autumn was also relevant, supporting the theory that she had planned her own demise. An Katarzyna's man called Marta on 2 separate occasions and wanted to meet her at Krakow Market Square. Marta wanted to go. She was desperate to talk to anyone who had anything to say. However, her private investigator felt that there was a prank call and strongly advised her not to go, as she may have been putting herself in danger. Her mother did not buy it. Kasia did suffer from depression, but she was functioning. Her hippie spirit meant that she had an appreciation for life and love. When her mother went to the university in central Krakow to put up missing persons posters, someone said they saw Kasia on a bus to Wolbram, an area on the outskirts of Krakow, but the witness was not 100% sure when this was. Kasia's mother and the private investigators still had nothing. So we're now way past the 48-hour point. And what happened is, now the captain of this tugboat made this horrifying discovery in January, 2 months after Kasia was last seen. And this is the reason I think that if the police had acted on that she was not a suicide case, or that she had run away from something, or that they had acted on that somebody had her, because her body wasn't found until 2 months later. So, or after she had been last seen. Police had never seen human skin detached from the entire body in Poland before, and realized they would need all the help they could get. Forensic experts were brought in from the FBI and forensic psychiatrists from all over Europe. The skin had been in the water for 2 or 3 weeks at the time of discovery. At first glance, the pathologists believed that the corpse was destroyed by the tugboat's propeller. So it had been in the water for 2 or 3 weeks, but it was 2 months since she had been seen. So that's what I'm thinking, if they would have acted on it. For some reason, I just think when I read more into this case, just think they could have probably saved her. I don't know if this is for sure. I'm just making an assumption here. So if, it looks like the corpse had been destroyed by the tugboat's propeller, but the pathologist looked at it again, and he quickly retracted that point of view. Police officer knocked on the door of the apartment of Kasia, shared with her mother. Marta was given a summons issued by the prosecutor. The documents stated she was needed for an interview about a murder with particular cruelty. When DNA tests confirmed the skin belonged to Kasia, Marta had to face the brutal truth. Her daughter was no longer alive. Many years later, she said, quote, "This paralyzed me. When I found out what he did to my daughter, I thought I would go crazy with pain," unquote. And I say this, and I feel it too, because I can't even imagine the pain and just that terrifying feeling, and you can never have her back. That would be more than disturbing. I don't even know how you'd get over that. I would probably drive myself insane. Whoever did this expertly skinned the body and sewed it back together. Kasia's arms and most of her face were missing. The cut went diagonal from the neck up over the face, included only one ear. The nipples were also removed. The way the skin was put back together with a hole on the one side made it evident that the person who made it intended to wear it as a suit. The official description of the skin, as released by the pathologists, read, quote, "Human skin from the front of the body without bone tissue, with visible navel and parts of pubic hair. last moments became even darker. The wounds were made to let her bleed out. Then, although it could not be verified conclusively, the pathologist believed she was skinned while she was still alive. This process would have been a laborious task that would have inflicted unimaginable pain. I just want to read that again. The darker picture of Kassia's last moments became even darker. The wounds made to let her bleed out. Then, although it could not be verified conclusively, pathologists believed she was skinned while she was still alive. This process would have been a long, laborious task that would have inflicted unimaginable pain. The reason that animals are stunned and then quickly killed is so they don't get stiff. And that is probably why he would have skinned her alive. Because once rigor mortis set in, it would be more difficult to skin her. Oh my god. Okay, so it's funny, as I read my notes or parts of stories, for cases as I'm going along, sometimes it clicks in my head, and that's why I stop and I think about it, because I'm thinking, why would somebody do it like that? And then I think of the animals and why they do all the horrible things they do to them. And then it clicks in my head, that's probably why he probably did skin her alive. So it was easier for him to get the whole skin in one piece. Oh my god. So the examination also found evidence on the clothing fragments found in the Vistula peculiar. They were trimmed in an odd way. For instance, her check shirt had one square neatly cut out. Experts, they were baffled, of course. They could not understand the significance of this. Because there had to have been, I don't know why, but there had never been a similar case in Poland. Ever. The FBI had not seen anything like it. They had been partial skinnings or dismemberments in previous cases, but nothing like this. Police feared that they were dealing with a new kind of monster. But where did he get his inspiration from? So, of course, the remnants work of the fictional serial killer Silence of the Lambs. The film was released 7 years before Kasia disappeared. In the film, police tried to crack down the killer who skinned his victims and sewed the skin together to make a corset. The film was inspired by the horrendous crimes of the real-life killer Ed Gein. So although the crime could have been inspired by the Silence of the Lambs, why was the unassuming and shy Kasia the chosen victim? She kept to herself for the most part and no enemies, and she didn't have friends, so, what was it? What was it about her? Was it because she was, maybe nobody'd miss her, or it would be easier to lure her in? Somebody very gregarious and outgoing may have brought attention to him. I don't know. So investigators took a deeper look into the case. Another macabre possible motive came to light. A few days before Kasia disappeared, an article about Saint Bartholomew appeared in a Polish magazine. He was an apostle who was skinned alive and beheaded in religious persecution. Remember, she was studying religion. So he is always depicted holding his flayed skin or the flayed knife with which he was skinned. In Michelangelo's painting Last Judgment on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican, Saint Bartholomew is in the center holding his own skin. Could Kasia's death somehow be related to the fact that she was a student of religion? Was something going on at the university that needed deeper investigation? Investigators looked into Kashia's last months alive, trying to find anything that would lead them to her killer, obviously. So she had been skipping classes for weeks before she disappeared, and her mom did not know this, as Kasia pretended to be in her normal routine, so she was going somewhere. But her mom had no reason to suspect that she had not been, that she was being deceived. But she did. But Kasia never did show up to classes. So in the last few weeks, why was this? Where was she? What was she doing? Why she had to be somewhere? She didn't have a lot of friends, so my mind would lead me to believe that she was with somebody, like a new boyfriend or somebody who would pull her away from her studies, which she seemed to be really into. And she was pretty secretive and quiet. And she would sit in the back at the lecture hall when actually attending classes. And she didn't interact with any other students. And this is what she really only had two friends, Anna and Ola. Anna, honestly, they didn't know much about her. Anyway, so there was a rumor that she was working at this university in the biochemistry lab, and said that she was going under another name, and she was a cleaner, and other cleaners actually recognized her picture, and her employment is never to be confirmed. She was never, I don't know if she was actually paid, or maybe she was paid under the table, but why go under an assumed name? It seemed to be a rumor and nothing else. But strange, I must say, because whoever did this to her had to be a professional surgeon or somebody who had a lot of experience skinning either animals or people, maybe done it before. She had also started to change her appearance before she died. She started losing weight. She started to change her hair color. Now, the police then surmised that the reason she did this was because the killer maybe was somebody she had a love interest with, and that he was grooming her to kill her by having her lose weight quickly so she would have excess skin once she had lost the weight, and then he would have more room, I guess, to work with. I don't know, but he would have more skin, and I have no idea. That it's just sometimes it's funny, as many cases as I have ever read, as many cases I've ever watched on TV, I mean thousands. I'm always fascinated, I guess, in a way, and appalled at the same time at how many times I am shocked by the horrible things people can do, and I shouldn't be, because I've pretty much lived through a lot, and listened and talked and walked and and just, but I am shocked by what people are capable of. But I guess I have to remember that we are all just animals in the end. Knowing that Kasia had frequented the place on Sundays for music exchange, she was always looking for Grateful Dead albums, but did not always find what she was looking for. Another regular at the club put her in touch with the music and book collector called Jacob. Someone at his still believes that Kasia had fallen in love with Jacob, but that he was not interested in her, as he had a girlfriend. Jacob was kind and polite to Kasia, but never led her on. Police looked into Jacob's past, but could not find anything that would indicate that he was the person they were looking for. So there was another person, that is who I think. Some people thought that he was the manager, but he was more of a bouncer. Female customers did not like him as he, quote, liked to accost girls, unquote. But who, from every angle possible, the police had to concede that it was another dead end. They did them to skinned animals. I know about a veterinarian. I mean, veterinarians don't usually skin animals, but a tailor who did so. And they're saying that also that he was a recluse with fetishes, sexual fetishes, but he had a lot of anger towards women, not the victim herself necessarily. More like he wanted to be one and couldn't, so he was angry. Or maybe he hated his mother. It is doubtful they actually had physical with them. He wasn't physically interactive with his victims. The crime, what experts call an equivalent murder. He replaces his sex or whatever with torture and murder. So pain and killing of a victim gives the killer satisfaction, similar to the way the brain perceives a drug or sex or food. Your serotonin level goes up and calms them down. And his equivalent murder is a form of sadism. So, sick and, sort of sexually driven, but not really. More that she was a female and he was angry he could not be a female. So, he can't be with women because he wants to be one of them. So he's always frustrated. So he tortures and murders the women to kind of satisfy that need for that serotonin increase in his brain. This kind of criminal is usually a repeat offender. Yeah, I would say so. According to this doctor, and I cannot pronounce his name, we'll call him Dr. C, an expert in sexual deviancy. It was only a matter of time before the killer found his next victim. Perversion is characterized by periodic pressure of perverse impulses. They can be returned once a month, once a year, once every several years. If this man lives, then there is a huge likelihood that this will happen again. Police felt the pressure to find the killer, of course, before he struck again. The only other murder where the killer skinned his victims happened in 1985, about 10 years before Cashia's death. So, there was a skinned or dismembered person. Remember, they said that there hadn't been one in Poland. But there was. A 48-year-old man killed and skinned his wife and teenage son. He sliced them open and cut out their eyes. He disposed of their bodies by throwing the parts in the Vistula River, the same river where Cashia's remains were found. This led into leads looking at this man because when they learned this man was released from prison and free at the time of Cashia's murder, they located the man and realized that he could have not committed the crime. He was bound to a wheelchair and physically weak. His prison psychiatrist also said that he would have been mentally incapable of committing the crime. Then, a spring night in May, 5 months after Cashia's body was discovered, Krakow police received a call from an elderly man saying there was a body in his basement that he believed his grandson was responsible for. So, the police responded quickly, and the old man showed them where the body was. The body belonged to the man's 50-year-old son. He had been beheaded. His scalp had been skinned. The old man then took them to the kitchen where his grandson, Vladimir, was dancing and singing. Vladimir had killed his father, then decapitated the body. He took off the skin of the head and his father's face, pulling it over his head like a baklava. He also wore his father's clothes and, wearing the mask, tricked his grandfather into believing that Vladimir was in fact his son. The grandfather had established a link between Vladimir and Kasia and found out that they studied at the same university. They were of similar age, and Vladimir enrolled only 1 year before Kasia. So they were, definitely close to each other for sure. He would have seen her, he would have noticed her. But there was obviously no evidence that the two of them ever crossed paths. But they could have very easily. After extensive search of the home, no traces of Kasia were found. Well, of course not. So, psychologists were also skeptical that Vladimir was Kasia's killer, although he had also skinned his victim. So apparently Poland doesn't really know how many people have been skinned in their country. I'm just gonna say that right now. And I don't mean any disrespect to the Polish police. I'm just saying that now we've discovered 4 or 5 people that have been skinned in the last 30 years so far. Well, actually back then in the last 20. So, I think there might have been more that have gone unfound. That's my guess. But I'm just speculating. That's my own personal opinion. He confessed that he killed his father because he had walked out on his mother. So, he hated his father. He wanted to take revenge on him. That is definitely one way to take revenge on a parent, for sure. So he was found guilty for his father's murder and given a life sentence in Poland. But after serving 5 years, he was deported back to Russia, where he was to live out the rest of his sentence. At his own request, that meant that once he was in Russia, he could not be prosecuted, or he could not be, prosecuted by Poland again, which is interesting. So investigators were divided about Vladimir. Did he perhaps murder Kasia in preparation of killing his father? For the most part, their instincts told them that he was not Kasia's killer, but in case such as this, with no precedent, anything could be possible. So, police received some information about a man. Anyway, in Kaz district on the banks of the Vistula River in Krakow. He was known to stalk women in the neighborhood. He was seen wearing women's clothing. He was investigated, but there was not enough evidence linking him into Kasia, so that trail went cold. So now we're in the year 2000, and DNA has really started to develop. Pathologists re-examined Kasia's remains on her skin. They found DNA that belonged to another person. So that's interesting. However, they could not find a match in their pool of suspects. So this is somebody completely different. So nobody they had looked at before was the one who wore her skin. So interesting. Despite profiles saying the type of criminal they were dealing with could be a repeat offender, no similar crimes were uncovered in Poland in the years following Kasia's death. But that doesn't mean the killer, he could have moved away. Could have been incarcerated, could have even died. Sadly, the case went cold and entered into Krakow's Archive X or X-Files department. The team of investigators at Archive X never forgot about the case and to follow up on leads as they came in, but still no arrests were made. An alternative theory came to light. Dr. Thomas Gunopka from the Department of Forensic Medicine in Poland noted that Kasia's skin contained post-traumatic stretch marks. Such marks appeared on victims' skin after being exposed to a rapid drop in altitude, like falling out of an airplane, or high speed, like falling out of a speeding car. He wondered if it was possible possible that Kasia was pushed from a vehicle and that her body was found by a person who then dismembered and skinned it. Interesting, but as Kasia usually traveled by public transport or walked, police did not find it plausible that she was pushed from a moving vehicle. Many clairvoyants came forward supporting the ideas that Kasia was not killed randomly, but that the killer was a person of social standing. It was even implied that a priest was behind the murder. Reputable clairvoyant Krzysztof Czakowski was brought into the Archive X office in Krakow. It is not a commonplace or practice in Poland to consult clairvoyants, but police were prepared to use any resources available. If clues came out of it, no harm could be done by following and looking up into a traditional investigation method. So, they kind of went out on a limb here, but they had nothing to lose. They were just trying to find anything because none of the DNA matched any of their suspects, so nobody there did it, even though they had severe killers, and definitely back before DNA. I mean, I would think they could probably pile up, enough circumstantial evidence to, put the crime on somebody. But because of DNA evidence in 2000, it really halted this case. So they are now speaking with Krzysztof Czakowski. He's a clairvoyant. He speaks to the dead or can see things that other people may not be able to see. He told the local newspaper that he picked up on something that police found in the initial investigation, but that was discarded due to a lack of evidence. After his interview, they revisited the clue. In 2012, 13 years after her remains were discovered, Kasia's case was reopened. Using the newest technology, a 3D body scan, they could see the extent of her external and internal injuries. Oh my gosh. Now, trigger warning and just warning in general. This is bad. I'm just gonna read the truth. Kasia was badly tortured before her death. The scan revealed that she had multiple injuries that were similar in nature. Pathologists felt that the strikes on her body when she was beaten were made from someone who practiced martial arts. Vegetation fragments were also found on the skin, which was not found in the Vistula River. Now this is a vital clue. This is going to be finding location where the murder was committed. The type of plant traces that were found was only present in limited areas in the Krakow region. Interesting. So really, science has gone up way out into the next league, which is great for finding, the real killers. The 52-year-old Robert Jensweski, I guess, known as the local weirdo. People who knew him referred to him as a freak. Well, that was in 2017 that police basically honed down in on him because a woman came forward and told the police about a man who was a car mechanic. He told her that he had served in the military and worked in a morgue. The woman found it odd that he was obsessed with Kasia's murder, even going so far as to visit her grave. Now, you know that most serial killers or killers that are, involved in something like this will revisit their victims at some time and are usually obsessed with the case. Robert had a rough childhood. His parents didn't want him. His was raised by his aunt. Then she died when he was 2. So he was taken by his paternal grandparents, his father's grandparents. He was severely physically abused by his grandfather. His father wrote a book remembering his own abuse at the hands of his parents. He tells of an instant where his grandmother grabbed his hand and opened the oven door, holding his hand close to the flame for a couple of seconds. Robert lived in this abusive home until he was 11 when he moved in with his parents in Casimir, I'm just gonna say that. For the first time in his life, his father was a poet and artist who seemed to always have his head in the clouds. His mother was cold and showed no affection to her only child. She was hardworking, God-fearing, and strict. She suffered from migraines, and the house had been kept dark and quiet most of the time. Young Robert did not have a happy home at all. Obsessive faith, rampant violence, and defined most of his family life. So he was a troublemaker at school. Other fellow students said that one of his pranks, he would remove one screw from the wall paneling in the general hallway, until one day the last screw was removed and the whole panel came down with one loud bang. So he didn't have many friends as he was aggressive and unpleasant. But if you remember in the beginning that they thought that he had an anger towards women, and I was saying, they were saying that he wanted to be a woman, but I was saying, it probably didn't like his mother. So if it was this man, and he had such a cold, callous mother who was God-fearing and abusive, that could definitely be, he could have just gone off the deep end one day. So he was called into the army. Robert was in his early 20s for his military service. He spent time working at a morgue where he assisted with dissections. There you go. After his military service, he worked at the Zoology Institute where he skinned animals. He loved tormenting them. Oh, God. Oh, that's so sad. When he killed experimental rabbits, he was fired from his job. So he's definitely demented and sick. His father had an affair and his parents divorced. His father moved out of the home, remarried, and had another child. His mother moved to Canada, where she lived for a couple of years, and this time Robert lived by himself and had sporadic contact with his father. He visited his mother in Canada, but preferred his home in Krakow, where he could do as he pleased. Then his mother returned for good in the spring of '98, 6 months before Kashia's murder. As early as 2000, he was on police's radar. So he was in connection with Kashia's murder. Neighbors told police to look at Robert. He was a stalker who dressed up in women's clothing. Wow, okay, so police searched his apartment. When they left, his mom witnessed strange behavior. He howled and rolled on the floor and shouted he had not murdered Kasia, and then he was set up by his friends from the gym. He spent a lot of time at the gym where he did bodybuilding and trained in martial arts. Now, if you remember, that's what the police said the scan revealed. Somebody who trained in martial arts definitely had abused Kasia. So as the evidence unfolds, really this man is looking more and more like the murderer. Although I find it strange he just killed one person. So maybe, I don't know. After Kasia's murder, people said that knew him that he had changed. He became obsessed with religion, went to church all the time, daily even. He also visited Kasia's grave at cemetery. Kasia's mother noticed a candle on her grave that would always be there, and once it was burned out, it would be replaced. Police installed surveillance cameras and recorded Robert visiting the grave every night after sunset for years. Sometimes he would bring flowers. Workers at the cemetery said that he also brought letters in the early years, which he not burned, but police could never find them. Gaz, where he lived, was on the riverbank near her body was found. From there, the Vistula flows towards Dabi, where Kasia's remains were found. He was known to fish down by the river and cut the fish himself. Throughout his adult life, a couple of dysfunctional relationships with women. He was demanding and pedantic. He would, for instance, insist they wear French underwear. They should be educated, but subservient. Although he didn't amount to much career-wise, some reports say that he was hyper-intelligent. He enjoyed walking around town for hours on end. He was unemployed. He did not have a lot of money. But he would occasionally go to the cinema, something he really loved to do. And that is how he met Kasia. Walking around the market square and faking interest in music and books. Police were able to establish the two knew each other. Although there was no evidence of actual relationship, Robert denied knowing her at all. The police discovered a detailed diary in which Robert wrote about women whom he stalked. But most damning of all, he described Kasia's murder. The details of this diary entry has not been made public. It was classified by the prosecutors, obviously very disturbing. Police were able to piece together Kasia's last days. Robert met Kasia, flattered her, feigning a deeper connection than there actually was. They talked about her favorite band and went to the movies together. Kasia was vulnerable and lost and found a companion in Robert. She lost weight, dyed her hair blonde, as Robert had clear preference for blondes. On mid-November morning in 1998, she agreed to go with him to a cottage on the outskirts of the city. The couple left on the bus heading in the direction of Wilbram, north of Krakow. The cottage was located in a small plot of land meant for gardening. Many residents from Krakow have gardens outside of the city, and small cottages are permitted on the land. Most people visit their gardens on the weekends, so in the middle of the week, like on Wednesday, the 12th of November, it was very isolated and quiet. Nobody would have seen Robert and Kasia arrive and entered the cottage. Kasia was lured under false pretenses, and instead of a romantic day out in the country, it was a day of horror. Robert commenced his torture ritual, and her screams went unheard. So he is torturing this poor woman, and she cannot be heard no matter how loud she screams. So evidence shows that Kasia was self-captured and tortured before he murdered her. Now remember I said earlier about how if the police had taken this more seriously, they could have probably found her alive. This is what I meant by it. I did not read this part, but what's telling me, like as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, well, if her body was found only a couple weeks, but she had been gone a couple months, she was probably tortured for a while, which would have given the police, if they took immediate action, time to find her. Possibly alive. Because by the weekend, she was probably running out of, screaming like voice, but she probably could have been found mean, if they, had looked in that area even, it wasn't very far from town. Just on the outskirts of the city where people from town had gone on the weekends. So Wednesday is when it started, when they got there. So maybe, in a couple of nights, I don't know. I'm just saying. So, however, it was not possible to determine for how long. But police searched the cottage and found Kasia's DNA in the bathroom. And remember, Robert denied knowing her at all, so finding her DNA at his property did not look good for Robert. Once Robert had killed and removed her skin, he tried it on, but it wouldn't fit. He was a short, stocky man, hunched like a bodybuilder. He kept the suit for a while before disposing it in the Vistula River. One could wonder why he decided to dump the suit in the river after all the effort of making it. Was he scared of being found out? Did the smell cause suspicion? In the home he shared with his mother, by disposing of it in the Vistula River in central Krakow, it was sure to service at some point. Did he throw it in to taunt police and the public? To show what he had done without the skin's evidence as evidence, Kasia would probably remain a missing person for all these years. Robert, arrested October 2017. He was to stay in prison until the end of March 2019. If prosecution doesn't bring the case forward before then, one could hope that Polish authorities can finalize this case soon. So, you can, I got a lot of this from a podcast, The Evidence Locker, so, a lot of it from the Facebook page, a lot of it from the Reddit's post, different people in Reddit's post, a lot from my own mind, just listening and reading there had to be somebody else too. That I don't know why. I'm sorry, it could not just be from, he did not just killed one person, so he skinned her, but why just her? She's really upset, to talk, she can't talk about the case, obviously, but she's really, to this day, is really upset. They're in the ex-archives in Krakow. It is in me that the murderer has not been punished, unquote. So, the day Kasia has made an appointment with her mother in one of the clinics at the estate after her father's death, the girl suffers from depression, and she seeks a specialist. But why go with this guy? What about him? He was kind of strange, but she was, I guess so. He only had a couple relationships, and she didn't appear to have any. No, maybe, I don't know, I'm just thinking of how they connected other than music, because she doesn't feel like the person that would be led just by music itself to go with a stranger. It feels more that, he had maybe connected with her somehow, found out about her dad, and that's how they connected. That's my feeling when and the captain says, that it's garbage floating in the Vistula. It screwed into the turbine. He finished mooring and brought the barge and went home. He was about to make a gruesome discovery, obviously, in the morning. The mechanic tried to get to the screw, although something was clogging the turbine, and what it was her skin. So there's actually pictures of this here from the Department of Forensic Medicine, who examined the skin. I'm just trying to translate some of this. Not all of it translates exactly, but why would Robert kill her? Why not anybody else? I don't know. I'm not really one on. I hate to throw out theories out there, but the other man who had skinned his father left, so he wouldn't be persecuted or couldn't be prosecuted for any more crimes of that nature. How do we know that they didn't know each other? I don't know. I don't think we have the whole story. I really don't. It's like maybe they knew each other as kids. Something. She was very secretive. She pulls her hood down, presses her hands to her ears, and quickens her pace. She won't talk to. Okay, so what I'm getting from this is this woman, Anna. She's got brunette hair, and she has Romanian roots. She likes to wear classic red clothes. Today she teaches English language. We tried. Met her twice. In 2016, November. I guess the investigators were waiting for her in front of the entrance to a building where she works. Please talk to us. She pulls her hood down, presses her hands to her ears, and quickens her pace. Second attempt, 2017. We ask why. Did she seek contact with Kasia after returning to Poland? Please don't follow me, she says, and picks up her pace again. A moment later, he stops, pulls out his cell phone, and begins typing on it. Anna G is one of the more mysterious characters in this story. The woman has been consistently silent for years. However, we reach people who tell us about several situations in her relationship with Kasia. And here's one of them. Alright, let me see. I have to translate this a little bit. Google Translate is good, although it isn't perfect. Okay, so they know each other from high school. They renew their relationship. Discovered it's in a Polish website, and interestingly, so this friend that Anna G lends the girl the iconic book acid test in the electric orangegate, and infects her with a fascination for music in the band The Grateful Dead. So this is this girl they're trying to contact. So this friend that's looking for contact with Kasia does not go directly to her house earlier. So this girl does not go directly to her house because earlier they had asked their mutual friend Ula about her. Another event that may shed light on the relationship between the murdered student and her friends. We can hear Kasia's voice on the archival recordings of Radio Krakow. She is just received an award for winning the competition, the facilitator asks if she wants to greet someone. Kasia says a few warm words about Ula. She does not mention Anna, although her friend also took part in the same, contest. So, the track leads to the spacing. Meanwhile, the traits lead us to the club. This is where Kasia thought bought the Grateful Dead albums. At the time, the premises was located in the basement of the dormitory. Today, no longer exists, but in the 80s and 90s, it was a legendary meeting place for music fans. This is where everyone who bought, sold, or traded records met. Krakow used to meet there, so like the whole town. And then Warsaw also came, he says. Record exchanges held on Sunday. Let's see. So today it is difficult to determine which of her friends showed her this place. It is known that she was there with both Ula and Anna. But Anna refuses to talk to anybody. But Ula says this cushy one was spoken about because I guess that Kasia had won an award, and she only mentioned Ula, not Anna, but Ula had been in the same contest, or had helped with it anyway. But the problem, I really have with this is that I don't know. There would be others, I think. I don't know. I mean, you can say, okay, well, there was DNA there. But they never then do decide if his DNA was on her skin. The properties on the outskirts of the city. She was seen there in the summer of '98 in the company of two other girls. One of them was Anna G. and Robert. So Robert and Anna knew each other, and they spent a lot of time in the outskirts of the city where Robert had a place where, they had grown their vegetables, and they had a cottage. Now, is Anna in on this too? That is my question, because reading this, I just found this just happened to. I mean, I can't speak Polish, however, it does have translate, so I'm trying to translate, and then some of the stuff is in half English, but she had been there with Anna and Robert, and she had been seen there with them before, so she was comfortable going this way. So where that she had been those 3 weeks that she was skipping classes, I bet you anything it was with them. Now, it's interesting because you can say, okay, even if his DNA was on it and her skin, does that mean that he could wear it? Maybe Anna was the one who wanted to wear it because she was obsessed with her. Interesting. So, I don't know. So, Anna's now 52 years old. She lives in the son of the poet Joseph J. He spent some time in Canada where his mother worked, and he probably returned to Poland in the spring of '98. Robert J.'s parents divorced. The father went to concubine, and the mother never made a new life for herself. The situation in the home with the family was tense. Physical and mental violence was used against the children, and corporal punishment was commonplace. The father, who took such models from his family home, excelled in this. So, you can read about it in his book, which he dedicated to his children, Asia and Robert. Here's an excerpt from it. Quote, "At that moment, Dad walked in and saw me jump out of bed. He washed me with a belt. They were always eager to beat me, but to think that I had to put a body under my bed, they didn't think," unquote. Another fragment, quote, "With one stroke, Mother found herself next to me, grabbed my hand, opened the door, and she shoved and opened the door of the stove and put my hand almost into the flame. Those were fractions of a second as she smeared her burned hands with oil and ordered it to be kept under cold running water," unquote. From the book we learn where Robert's father is very religious, faith and violence, two words that characterized the family. So later the man transferred these patterns to an adult life. Basically, he beat his own child like he was beaten. So, in the Auschwitz is right, the concentration camp, we found the prosecutor's files from '92. Documents show that in November of the year in Krakow's gas, Robert was accosted twice by a group of local teenagers. First event took place in Wanika, second one front entrance to the store in Krakowska. As a result of the scuffles, a man was damaged glasses worth 750,000 PLN, the currency at the time. Currently, 75 PLN, 7,500 at that time. So inflation was really bad then, but it has gotten better. The latter submitted a notification to the Krakow prosecutor's office that perpetrators were never discovered and the case was discontinued. So they are very poor. And it demands on the women. But it doesn't say, obviously, the more I read, so obviously Anna and Robert had been friends because they've been seen together, and they feel that they were a couple. It is difficult to clearly establish it. Clues indicate that the girl may have been in love with Robert. 3 weeks before her death, she began to lose weight, changed his style of clothing, and dyed blonde. On Thursday, November 12th, gosh, it does not come to the meeting, as we know. So, there's an area surrounded by a small fence. In the middle, there's a building with a basement. The girl is trapped in the basement. Most likely, the perpetrator is tying her up with something. Even if she screamed, it didn't help. The sounds were unable to reach outside. So, that was the problem, that, there was nothing to to echo her screams to the outside world. So this is when they did the body scan, the torturing. Robert was practicing martial arts at the school. Many indications that the student was still alive at the time of skinning is still not known. However, when she was aware of what was happening to her, one of the hypotheses is that the perpetrator tried to put the girl's skin on after his death. So they weren't sure. So when it's translated, sorry, that's why I'm taking so long, because when it's translated, and then I have to kind of decipher, because it's not perfect. But okay, so what they're saying here is that as she is aware of what is happening to her, they do not know. That's what it says. So whether she was aware if it was happening to her, they'll never know. That is not known. One of the guesses or hypotheses is that the perpetrator tried to put the girl's skin on after her death. So I don't know. He worked in dissecting room, yes, I understand that, and there were such big boys from Kaz who were carrying bodies. A longtime employee of the hospital says, when exactly did Kasia die? This is not known. The clues indicate, however, that Robert took the skin torn off from the girl to his apartment in Kaz. Most likely he threw her to the Vistula River in December. So she was taken November. So she wasn't killed for a while. But he felt all this guilt. Now, I don't know if he felt guilt because he killed her for Anna. That's the thing that really gets me, is this Anna girl won't talk to them. But Ulla will. Not that we were supposed to be very good friends, and she even looked her up when she came back to Krakow, so I don't know, that's interesting. Maybe he skinned her for her. No, I'm not saying he didn't skin her. I'm saying, but why? Because then he felt like he never killed again. They can't find anything that he did, just her. He became very religious. He visited her grave, he wrote her letters. I mean, he brought flowers. Obviously, he was either in love with her and he didn't want to kill her. Because, I mean, I understand he was very cold about it and all that. I mean, that's all too, but then he's got this other side. It's like Jekyll and Hyde. I don't know, maybe he has. I'm just speculating here because this doesn't feel like smooth when there is a definite, a definite timeline, and there's not other people involved, and it's very cut and dry, or, things come together. But here, you don't have somebody who visits a girl's grave regularly, writing her letters for weeks and weeks, after months and years after the murder. I mean, he visits her grave. The rest of it, from what it says. I mean, every day he goes to church, every single day. After the murder, he visits the girl's grave. He writes her letters. He burns a candle. When it's burnt out, he replaces it. I mean, those aren't really things a serial killer or somebody who does such a thing to somebody does to the. I don't know. That just feels very strange. It's almost as if Anna was in love with her, and she was there. seen for the last 3 weeks going out of town, right? So, the last 3 weeks she's been skipping class, going out of town, but she's been known to hang out with these 2 girls. The one girl will talk to people, the other girl is like, leave me alone, please don't talk to me. But she had been seen with Robert many times. I mean, he's always in the first seat, this guy says. One of the brothers of the church says. He's with us every day. So this is a man that has deep grief. He's trying to repent. We talked to the clergyman several times. He remains deaf at our requests. He does not reply to emails. Likewise, his supervisors. Our findings show, however, that Robert J. confessed to one of the monks of what he had done. We failed to talk to him. He died in the convent there in Poland. He took the secret of the confession to the grave. So, information about the disappearance of Kasia is also available. Aforementioned. It was like he called the girl's mother twice after the disappearance. He didn't introduce himself. He wanted to meet her at the market in Krakow. She did not come. Detectives dissuaded her. So, the Datsu is most likely. It's most likely that he called the girl's mother twice. That's strange. I mean, a lot of this is strange. There's definitely there's more to the story. Really, a really sad story, and very strange. 19 years passed since Kasia remains were found. Murder cases have a 30-year statute of limitations. So, they never prosecuted him, I guess. They just assumed. So really, probably everything's probably. Nothing is. Maybe he'll write a story before he dies about the truth and give it to the world, but I mean, honestly, I did a monastery. For over a year, journalists of Onet and Radio Krakow have been establishing the facts. We got to the witnesses of those events and people who are tied to attribute to a brutal crime. So that's sad. I mean, because I don't know. I really don't think. I mean, he's so emotional about. Obviously, he's never killed anybody before or after this, but why won't Anna talk? That's my biggest question. I always say there's that one piece of that puzzle, that one clue that is just gnaws at me. This is the one. This is the one piece that she won't say anything. But if she was her friend, then why wouldn't? I understand. I mean, they say he's a psychopath and everything, and yes, he probably did, psychopaths don't usually feel that kind of need to repent. I mean, every day going to church, every day, just being with these monks and confessing. I mean, the psychopaths don't do that. They don't care at all. That's the definition of a psychopath. Somebody who's no remorse or thought or feeling for anybody, even themselves, really. But maybe he was in love with Anna. She was pissed at her, at Kasia. For some reason, maybe she was in love with her, and Robert was in love with Anna, and he tortured her at the hands of Anna, or at the wishes. There's something there that, yes, he may be guilty, but there was somebody else, I guarantee you, because for 3 weeks he had been seen going to the outskirts of town. There is something there, I'm telling you. I know I get into my little and then, of course, so in the initial investigation, so the forensic people initially, they did not find that there was ever the three parties involved. They say after the examination, the doctor did not find the participation of third parties. Meaning, not sure, actually. However, after the initial examination, the doctor did not find the initial participation of third parties. I guess meaning there was somebody else. Initially, they did not find that, but then they went back and there was somebody else. But who is that? That's just kind of thrown in there. So that is interesting. I'm telling you, this Anna really bothers me. It is that it will always kind of bother me. And she's a short brunette with Romanian roots. She's a short brunette. Now remember, Robert did not like brunettes. So maybe she was in love. That's what I'm saying. She was in love with Anna. Or Anna was in love with Kasia. Robert maybe he was in love with Anna earlier. They were really good friends and felt like he needed to, he pulled Kasia in, said he loved blondes and all this stuff, and I mean, just her actions. Okay, so I know I keep bothering this, but this is bothering me. It's November 2016. We're waiting for her in front of the entrance to the building where she works. Please talk to us. She pulls her hood down, presses her hands to her ears tightly, quickens her pace. Second attempt, April 17th. We ask, why did she seek contact with Kasia after returning to Poland? Please don't follow me, she says, and picks up her pace again. A moment later, she stops, pulls out her cell phone, and begins typing on it. So, yeah, that bothers me. That, why wouldn't, I mean, if she had nothing to do with this, why would she not talk to them? But Ula kind of answers this when she says that there was something there. There was a relationship with the girls that was very close, and she starts looking for contact with Kasia. So they've known each other since high school. So they do not go. Interestingly, my friend looking for contact with Kasia does not go directly to her house. Earlier, they asked their mutual friend Ula about her. Another event that may shed light on the relationship between the murdered student and her friends. We can hear Kasia's voice in the archival recordings of Radio Krakow. She was just received an award for winning, so maybe they were just jealous. That's what I think. I mean, Anna, there's something about Anna that is not right. I mean, I get that he killed her, he skinned her, but why was he so remorseful? Serial killers are not remorseful. They don't go to church every single day after they kill somebody. They don't stop killing. And that's what the police said, that they even said that the horrific nature of this crime would not be the last. And it probably wasn't the first ever it was. If this guy was the killer, then everything the detective said is not true. So he doesn't fit the profile. He was abused as a child, but other than that, I mean, there was somebody else that were pushing him, and kind of, I mean, he had other girlfriends. Why didn't he skin them? He did some, he abused some animals. I get that, but so she knew he knew how to do that. I'm thinking that she was jealous of her. Somehow was in love with her. Remember, she had known her from high school. There could have been a lot of animosity. Maybe Kasia was prettier. Maybe she was more popular. I don't know. Maybe just her fact that she was different, just being quiet and mysterious makes, the opposite sex more interested in you in some cases. So maybe, Anna felt a threat or jealousy to the point of wanting to kill her, but couldn't do it herself, and knew Robert, and knew of his past, maybe. I don't know. Just something very strange. That does not make sense. Just because I really just don't think he would have gone to her grave over and over again, and gone and seeked out forgiveness, basically, from the monk. He had to tell somebody, and never did it again. 20 years, never killed anybody again. Just went to church every single day. Does that sound like a serial killer, or even? And that's just so weird. That is very weird. I don't know why people do what they do. I will never understand the human psyche for sure, but something about it does not sit right with me. There are two ways this could be. One, it could be absolutely that he did it alone, and he lured evidence. Out of all the evidence that they had against him, that really bothers me. He was weird, I get it. He stalked women, I get that, but going from stalking to absolutely torturing, skinning alive, it's completely, totally different. You know, he didn't even go from step A to B to C. He went from step A to Z, like nothing. I mean, in between. So that doesn't make any sense at all. Not a bit of sense. And I'm rambling on, I know, but it's just going on in my mind of what they said. You know, in all the news articles I read, everybody just ends it with Robert. But I don't know, I just don't. I think something about that Polish website I found, and just that little Anna bit and Lula just not saying that she went to somebody else's house. I mean, she's hiding something, she's texting somebody, whether somebody else is there, possibly, maybe there were, it just seems she was so abused. Then the stretch marks, when she was like thrown out of car after. I don't know, a moving vehicle. Maybe that was the start of the torture. Maybe that's why he did it. Maybe that's what we're missing. The reason he skinned her was because Anna had gotten so angry that they had been driving on a moped or something fast, and he pushed her off of it. They were riding together. Then she's hurt really bad. Maybe she broke something, or she's fatally injured, or bleeding, or they think she is. They know they're close to this place that they had been going for the last few weeks, and Anna loses it. She's pissed that she didn't talk about her during her speech on Radio Krakow. I mean, that seems like a big deal there, and she's jealous of her. Maybe Robert is in love with her. They seem to be having a relationship. Everything's going okay. He hasn't killed anybody else. I mean, he does have a speculative past, which would make him a perfect target to then say, well, she's gonna die anyway, so just go ahead and skin her. Make her pay for doing all this to me, you know. I'm just going through a scenario in my mind because I just find it so strange. I know I keep saying this, but I just find it really, really strange that it goes every day to church afterwards. You know, Jeffrey Dahmer did that. After killing his first victim, he went to church, but then he said he couldn't control it anymore, and he had to kill again. This guy for 20 years went to church every single day. Every day. Went to her grave, wrote her letters. Jeffrey Dahmer did not write his victims' letters. He did not continue to go to church, and he definitely didn't go to church every day. And he was probably the closest one to feeling any kind of regret or remorse, because he didn't want to be left. I don't know, there's something. I think there's something we're missing. I think Anna knows that there is a statute of limitations on murder in Poland. I think that the other guy who was already skinning people wanted to tell something. Maybe he knew Anna. There is something else there. I'm not there, so I don't know the layout. Although my half-brother has lived there, like in that area, before. I have been there, but never lived there. Something doesn't feel, no, it doesn't feel right. It is it's a different system. I don't know, different philosophies. But have a great evening. Thank you for listening. I would love to hear where you said definitely that Robert did it alone. Do you kind of have the same weird suspicion that I do about Anna? Do you know anything about this case that I could not find out? I would love to know, because it's just gnawing at me. Why wouldn't she talk to people? Why would she hide? Why would she come back looking for Anna, but yet not go straight? I'm bleeding. I have a little cut on my hand. Oh well. I just noticed that now. Like, oh my gosh. How did I get that? Anyway, like what? So, what do you think happened? I mean, we know that Robert was definitely involved, of course, but I don't think, intuitively, I don't think that is the end of the story. It does not end there with him. I don't know why. Something is off about Anna. So as I was saying, comment about what you think. I'd love to know, because do you think just that Robert did it? That was it. He did it. Nobody else was involved. He lured her and then basically became a monk the rest of his life. Bound by a life of, begging for forgiveness. Doesn't make sense. Never killing before or after. Why did they all three or four with all on the go to the outskirts of town where she was eventually murdered? Why did they all take her there together and then just end up killing her? Why did she have those stretch marks on her that was indicative of falling out of a moving vehicle? Why did... there's so many questions. Why did all these people not say anything? Was it because they knew that it wasn't Robert who was really involved? Maybe, he had trained with Anna secretively. I mean, she's very secretive. So why would she be any different then? Why would she tell people anything that they wanted to know? Maybe she was friends with Robert. I don't know. I think there are things that, if they want to stay hidden in a small community in other countries, will stay hidden no matter what. Just like the monks. Yes, they're sworn to to be quiet. Not shocking. However, my brain says, no, something is off. Something is terribly off. Not that Robert wasn't involved, and not that he should not be prosecuted, but there's somebody or somebodies who were involved as well, and they are good at keeping secrets. And you know, in America we think differently. If you've gone to other countries, you realize that there are secrets that will never be revealed, no matter how deeply you want to dig, because of the past trauma that has inflicted itself onto European countries and Asia and the Middle East. We will never be able to understand, even begin to understand the fear, the secrets they've had to keep from dying during World War I and II. I mean, all the wars they've internally fought, we will never be able to comprehend as Americans. And I think about that when reading about mysteries or cases or missing persons or from other countries, that they have a different view on keeping secrets. The secrets sometimes will live a lifetime inside of them, for no other reason than they basically had to keep quiet about everything to stay alive, especially in Poland in World War II. I mean, Auschwitz was in Poland, as we know, and Warsaw, and just they suffered, especially, I mean, if you were, even part Jewish, the priests were murdered, Jewish people were murdered, and, homosexual people were murdered. I mean, so secrets were part of staying alive. We have never really had to, other than, hate crimes, but this was, we'll never know the extent of the fear that they felt in other countries during those times. I mean, because it wasn't like just a small group of people. It was basically the whole countries were against certain people, and they had to be absolutely silent about who they actually were to stay alive. They had to pretend to be other people. My dog's taking a to China, I guess. So, as I'm rambling here, thinking about this, when you sometimes we get so focused in on the details and get hyperlinked to one, two, three, four tiny details, like micro details. And we cannot see the bigger picture. And I think there was one. Which is why these poor people did not come forward with what they knew. Because they couldn't. I don't know. I was not there. There's always more. That we'll never know. There's more perspectives. There's more details that the prosecutor would not allow us to know. So we have to kind of summarize it in a very basic white and black manner. Because to leave cases unopened that seem so solvable, it's almost against our human nature to accept that. Like the paranormal, the cases that involve deaths that have paranormal ties. It's very hard for people to accept because it's never going to be really solved. There's always a conclusion or a quick answer. Yes, that seems so